Today, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to change the rear suspension on this Ninja 650, and to be quite honest, it's going to be shocking. So there's a few things you're going to need before we get started here. One is to support the weight of the bike from an overhead source that is strong enough to hold the overall weight of the motorcycle. What I'm using here is a steel pipe run through the trusses of the building with a ratchet strap coming down and then splits over and hooks on to each side of the rear frame section. I also have the bike on not only a rear wheel stand but also on a front triple tree. The object here is to just take enough weight off the rear of the bike so we can remove the shock assembly and put the new one back in its place. You're also going to need a 17mm open end wrench, one 8mm hex, a 17mm socket, and a ratchet. So once you have all of that together, it's time to get started. Okay, ladies and gents, once you have your bike all stabilized, we've got the front triple tree, we've got it on the rear wheel stand, and we have the ratchet. Now the ratchet now is just tight enough so this strap won't fall down. So what we want to do is hold the slack out of the way so it doesn't bind up on you. And just begin to gently ratchet this thing up until you start to feel the bike barely take weight off of the rear wheel stand. You do not want it to completely remove all of the weight. There we go, right there. It just started to lift the bike. So you can see we've offset it a little bit. The reason we want to just barely leave the weight balanced on the rear wheel stand is one, for safety, and two, it gives me a little bit of wiggle room if I need to lower the suspension on the bike to fit the new spring in. So if you start to let it down slowly, you take all the weight off, the bike is suspended now. And that's all you need. You can also do this with two friends helping you to hold the weight up if you don't have anywhere you can hoist the bike from overhead. So now we're going to remove the plastic cover so we can access the top bolt. For that, you just need a flathead screwdriver and it comes right off. So now we're going to remove the lower bolt first. For that, we need the 19mm open end and our Allens. 8mm on my socket, and the open end wrench will prevent the nut back here from spinning. You may not need it at first. Okay, we have it broke. Okay, once we have the nut and washer removed from the rear, we want the weight balanced on the rear of the bike so this bolt can slide out freely. Just like that. And now you see the shock moves up and down. We have a perfect balance on the rear to do this job. So now we want to change over and put our 17mm in, and we want to attempt to break this with a regular. There we go. Now once we get ready to pull this, and you'll see there is a spacer and also a bushing that goes into this, so do not lose those. You lift the rear of the shock, move it toward the rear of the bike, and you're out. And obviously the installation is the opposite of the removal. So we're going to come in from the rear. We're going to slide the new shock into place. Begin threading this bolt in. Now make sure you look up the torque specs on your motorcycle. This thing is right at, felt like 60 to 70 foot-pounds. I've not looked it up. I will do that and come back and torque it. I told you, isn't it shocking how easy that was? Right? Okay, so now we're just going to drop this thing back down. I'm going to take the pressure off of the strap, which isn't much at all. Make sure that you're still on your rear wheel stand, because that would suck to let the pressure off and then the bike slam down. That's it. But there we go, guys. Wasn't that shockingly easy? So maybe you want to buy your own spring and disassemble the assembly and put it all back together yourself. You may not have the tools, or there may not be a shop nearby that you can take it to have them replace the spring for you. I'm going to show you how to build something and you can do it yourself. Alright, so to disassemble this bad boy, this is what you're going to need. You need a piece of 2x4, okay? About 12 inches long. You're going to need 2 pieces of all thread, threaded rod, whatever you want to call it. You need those to be a couple inches longer than the entire shock assembly. You need a washer on the bottom and a nut. Same thing on the other side. You also want to take some sort of bit. I used a unibit step bit to drill a cone out into the bottom of this board. And that allows the base of the shock to sit down in that firmly where it doesn't slip around. That's all we needed to do. For the upper assembly, I used a piece of decking board that I had laying around. I drilled slightly larger holes here for my threaded rod to go through, and also a 2 3/4 inch hole through the center. Now that size relates distinctly to the diameter where we can get just enough grip onto the outer spring rim without compressing this washer. See this notch right here? That is a split washer that has to come off so we can remove the spring. So once you have everything ready, place your shock into the assembly. We will slide our top board on here. Washers on the top. You may also want to put just a little bit of either anti-seize or lubricant onto the threads. It'll make it a little easier to tighten down. You want to use a good sturdy piece of wood for this, or flat stock steel if you have a way to cut a perfect hole through that without blasting it with a torch. You need a clean circle. If you look right here, you can see the wood is just on the outside of this split washer. So when we tighten these down back and forth, it's going to compress that spring where we can get that washer off. Then we take the tension off and the spring will come right off. So now what we want to do is we're going to go back and forth and tighten these down. You want to pay close attention that your spring stays straight when you're compressing the board down. If the spring starts to go crooked or kink up on one side, swap to the other bolt and start tightening that down. You want the spring to compress flat and not at an angle. That's the reason I notched out the lower board as well, because you don't want this thing coming apart. These rods are more than enough to support the weight, and with it being recessed down into the wood, it works out well. So we're just going to work back and forth and do this until we're ready to remove the washer. We'll be right back. And please be careful anytime you're dealing with compressed springs and suspension. It is extremely dangerous. I take no responsibility if you decide to do this on your own. Please stand off to the side and be aware of what you're doing. All right, once we have the spring compressed, we're going to use a screwdriver and spin that washer where the split is on the bottom. And we'll take a second screwdriver to help us get this thing out. And there you go. The spring retainer is out. Now all you need to do is release the pressure. Make sure your bolts do not unthread on the back side or you're going to be in for a big surprise. And there we go, spring removed. You have the dust cover here. You can also replace it, throw it away if you want that bare shock assembly look. But now you can replace it with a better spring rate to suit you and your riding style, or if you just want to dress up your bike, paint it, make it stand out a little bit, you can do that as well. Again, please keep in mind that dealing with compressed suspension components is dangerous. So take responsibility for yourselves. Be safe out there, guys. Leave any questions or comments you have below. Until next time, ride safe.